there. So
right. So we won't have many sunny days left. So let's utilize it when we can.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's start this. It looks like we're going. I'm gonna formally begin the podcast now.
Let's.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when this finds you. Welcome to the Sound of the Loons podcast. I'm Steve McPherson, and if I can call you Betty, then Betty, when you call me, you can call me Cal. On the docket today, we'll be going over the team's performances against FC Cincinnati and Nashville SC. Two teams I am forever going to have a hard time remembering which one is which, as well as looking at the upcoming game against our old friends, FC Dallas. But first, we wanted to take a moment and give a shout out to the presenting partners for our 2020 season. Allianz, Allina Health, Bell Bank, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, Federated Insurance, and M Health Fairview. We really want to thank those sponsors for sticking with us throughout this weird and wild season. To learn more about any of our partners, you can visit mnufc.com/club/partners. Cal, we're just going to get right into it. I don't have any other dithering about to do, so we're just going to start talking about FC Cincinnati. My opening statement about the game against FC Cincinnati is that I had to go read my own recap to really remember what happened in this game, which was less than a week ago, which is about where I'm at as far as following games, I think.
Yeah. About 10 seconds ago, I just had a mild panic because I thought, oh, that's right, we played FC Cincinnati, didn't we, as well? I can't remember much either.
Yeah.
No, look, I mean, I think Adrian Heath hit the nail on the head, really, in terms of the Cincinnati game. And I think satisfactory is probably the best way to view it because it wasn't a particularly pleasant performance. It was okay. But the simple fact of the matter is that they got the win that they needed to get. I think anything less than a win would have been unacceptable, especially at Allianz Field. So they went and got the victory that they needed. I thought Cincinnati looked okay. They looked a lot better than what I thought they would. And I think Jaap Stam deserves a bit of credit for that because he adopted a brave approach coming to Allianz Field and playing a 4-3-3. It's a formation that he wants to play a lot more of. And essentially he insinuated several weeks ago that it is the long-term plan for Cincinnati to do that. But they just, in his own words, they simply don't have the players to do it. So I thought it was quite brave of him to do it at Allianz Field of all places. But I thought they looked quite good. I thought it was just obvious that they're lacking a bit of sharpness in the final third, much to the same issues that Minnesota have right now, in my opinion, over the last two games. But Locadia, I thought, just looked so short on confidence. This is an individual that Brighton and Hove Albion paid near $21 million for from PSV Eindhoven not too long ago. And I just thought he looked so short of confidence. And Kubo was trying to get himself back involved. But, I thought the backline stood about as firm as they ever have done. I thought Boxall was near flawless again. I thought Dibasi gave another good account of himself. Look, it was a good performance, Steve. And the main thing is that they got what they needed. But it's probably not going to be a performance that lives in the memory for too long.
Yeah, I was surprised that FC Cincinnati didn't sort of bunker out of the gate. I think that was the thing we had talked about, and I think they had more or less done that maybe in their last game, where they had played maybe a three-man back line, I think, or something like that, where they had come out very defensive.
Against NYCFC, Steve, they'd gone with a five-man back line.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Prior to them coming to Minnesota, they'd gone the previous 11 with a five-man back line. So that's why I was quite surprised when I saw the 4-3-3 formation.
Yeah, so I sort of was expecting that bunkering. We've talked about it before at Allianz Field, and that you see teams getting a little more conservative now playing there. But it was fun. I mean, I was glad because they looked pretty spry. They were willing to, press high and push forward. The game in the opening minutes sort of had a back and forth feel. So Chase Gasper drew that penalty early on in the game, which was a big difference. I think playing a goal up on Cincinnati is a huge difference. I mean, I remember Minnesota United's early, inaugural season say, if you fell behind by a goal, it just felt like we're not going to get back up in it because it was just, there wasn't enough sharpness. There wasn't enough sort of focused aggression and sort of all of that stuff to get it going. So it's one of those things that scoring a goal against a team that is not a front foot playing team is great. And so Chase had I thought an interesting comment about drawing that penalty kick. I went back and looked at the highlight too. So after the game, he said, we've been really focusing this week on defensive pressure or attacking pressure. He sort of couldn't decide which one he wanted to call it. But the idea is, he said, is when we have the ball and we're attacking, you get on your guy and stay tight. So even if we do lose the ball, we're pressing them in basically their own box. And so, they panic and it just worked out. And you can see that sort of happening. And it's an interesting idea that your press begins even while you still have the ball. I mean, I know this is a principle that teams like Red Bulls have put into practice in the past, but that you could see that Chase was almost, rather than looking for space, he's almost looking to guard the next guy, like his man. And then when the ball sort of comes off of Reynoso, he's just there to go for it. And he gets there first and he gets that call. And that's one of those things that I found, I had never thought about that's sort of a fourth dimensional chess way of thinking about how you execute that press. And it was cool to hear him talk about that.
Yeah, it's a modern day fullback, Steve. It's either overlapping or underlapping. And I thought Chase Gasper is, he's obviously proven he can do it. And I thought he was able to execute it well against Cincinnati. And, obviously drew the penalty. And I must admit, Steve, when I first saw the challenge, I thought, well, it's a heavy challenge. It wasn't until we saw the replay when I realized how bad it was. And for me, I'm still quite surprised that a red card wasn't drawn, because it is essentially over the ball. It's above the ankle, the challenge is from Deplania. And we've seen a lot less punished, a lot worse. And I was just quite surprised after the referee went to view it and everything through the monitor. I was quite surprised. It's a penalty. It's a stonewall penalty. There's no doubt about that. No debate to be had there. But I just wondered if it did warrant further punishment. But either way, look, Minnesota didn't need Cincinnati to go down to 10 men, because they were at that stage they were bossing the game in the final third. They were causing problems. Cincinnati were forced to sit deeper than probably what they would have wanted to. But it was, there's no malice, there's no ill will in Mathieu Deplan's challenge, but it's just grossly mistimed. And Gasper is so fortunate that there's not just even a little bit more force in a challenge, because if there is, Steve, I think Gasper's breaking his ankle there. I was quite surprised when Gasper was able to get up and continue. I know there was a bit of blood drawn. And actually, because Gasper got the yellow card in that game, it meant he missed the game against Nashville. I actually think it's probably a blessing in disguise, because I bet you there was a fair bit of bruising on the ankle after that, and it gave Gasper a game off and time to recover efficiently.
Right. I had forgotten that Gasper had accumulation, which is why he wasn't playing the last game. This goes to show it's so hard to keep track of what's going on. I was like, he could also probably use a rest at this point, given the number of games that he's started. We'll get to Baki Dabasi's game at left back as well. Let's stay on this game for a little bit longer. I wanted to talk about, because I think one of the major things that happened in the game, obviously, was Kevin Molino coming in and scoring that goal, coming back from injury. And we'll talk a little bit about the formation thing, because we always talk about formations, and I have some qualifications to talking about that. I have some qualifications to talk about this discussion we're about to start about substitutions, because this has sort of become the new thing that Adrian Heath likes to complain about at press conferences, because people ask him about his substitutions. Before it was the underdog thing. That was like in MLS's back. That was what everybody loved to harp on. But and I think that I want to say up front, first of all, that coaches, are, made on their beliefs. That is what makes you the coach you are. I don't necessarily think Adrian Heath should be doing anything differently per se. I'm just interested in the conversation about when to substitute and why it's effective and how it can change the game. Some coaches obviously are going to use a lot of substitutes. Adrian Heath is on record as saying that he believes he picks the starting 11 because he believes they're going to all go the distance. That's how he chooses. He chooses based on their performance. He believes that players drop themselves out of that starting 11, and that it's his job simply to put out the best team he can put out, and the team he believes is going to go the distance. And if he sees a team that's creating chances, even if they're not finishing those chances, he wants to give them the opportunity to finish those chances, and so he'll stick with those substitutes. So he sort of generally doesn't necessarily go to the bench early or quickly or profusely in a game. Here's what I wanted to lay on the table, because this is something I looked into. Going back to the 4-0 win against Real Salt Lake, so starting from that game, Minnesota United have scored 6 second half goals in the run of play. 4 of those goals have either been scored or assisted by a sub. So Ja'Cory Hayes was assisted by Raheem Edwards in the 75th minute versus RSL. Both those guys were subs. Robin Lod was assisted by Hassani Dotson against RSL, who was a sub. Although I will say Hassani came on for Ozzy in the 18th minute. So it's not like a sort of the same sort of normal situation. Robin Lod was then assisted by Raheem Edwards against Columbus. And then Kevin Molino came on and scored the goal against FC Cincinnati. So all I'm saying is that I think this maybe points to the fact that I think Adrian Heath actually makes really good substitutions when he's called upon to make those substitutions. And that sometimes it won't disrupt the flow of the game, but it can instead lift it to another level, which we're going to talk about with Kevin Molino against FC Cincinnati. But I will make way for your response to that.
I think as well right now. So this has become a thing, is it, Steve? People are talking about substitutions, are they?
I think I only know it because I don't know how many people are talking about it. I know it because I have to edit the press conference quotes and use them for the recap. And so he sort of gets a question, it seems like every game, about the substitutes. And then he says, I don't know why everyone's so obsessed with substitutes here in America, which I don't think, I think if you look at the world discourse about soccer and football, people talk about substitutes all the time, every place. So I don't know.
I think as what you've just said, Adrian, alluded to, is you pick the 11 because you think they're the best available bunch to go and win the game. And in a perfect world, they would all go 90 minutes, and sometimes you've got players available on the bench that can come on and cause issues. Sometimes there's players that are purposely put on the bench to be brought in later to cause issues, I thought, what did he do against Cincinnati, Steve? He brought on Marlon Hairston, didn't he? And I thought that was the right call at that stage. All these games are just seeming like the same game at the moment.
Yes.
But I can't remember who he came in for, but I thought at the time, yeah, Marlon Hairston makes sense because he's fresh legs and he's a relatively fast individual. And it's very different for. I can't remember who he came on for, but he was a different player. Marlon Hester is a different player from the player that he came on for, from what I remember. But I think I understand Adrian's game management from this point of view. I'm slightly torn about this now because I understand the need for substitutions. I understand wanting to bring in fresh legs, new ideas. I get that argument. But I also understand the other point as well, because I saw the quote of Adrian saying about, you don't want to disrupt the flow of the game. I understand that. And I thought he was right to do what he did against FC Cincinnati. Because to our knowledge, the Cincinnati game, the reason several of those players weren't used was because they were more than likely going to start the game in Nashville. So it's all about game management. And I would assume, skipping ahead a little bit here, in terms of the Nashville situation, because there weren't many substitutions from what I can remember last night. Again, I think Adrian's probably thinking about, right, well, Robin Lod, for example, didn't play a minute in Nashville. He travelled, but that's because the roster isn't the biggest at the moment, and you just never know. Sometimes you might think, right, okay, well, maybe he has to come in for a certain player or something. But in an ideal world, he wasn't going to play, and he didn't play, because my assumption now is that he's going to go and start against FC Dallas and feel a little more refreshed and replenished than what he would do had he have played minutes in Nashville. So from my understanding of what the issue is here, I'm on the fence. I can see both sides of the argument here, Steve. But no, I think right now Minnesota as well, we're very fortunate that we have such a wide variety of players who do offer very different scenarios, and the roster is about as thick as it's been from a quality standpoint, not from a quantity point of view, but from a quality standpoint. It is the best roster they've had. And maybe Adrian, he feels as though that there are certain players that offer more against certain individuals from the opposition. Maybe he feels as though, let's say Ethan Finlay, for example, would give Daniel Lovitz last night, a torrid time as opposed to Robin Lod. Maybe he feels as though Robin Lod will give, I'm assuming Ryan Hollingshead or somebody will start at left back for Dallas. a more difficult time than Ethan Finlay. And that's why Ethan Finlay went the 90 minutes last night. We don't know, ultimately. We don't know. It's me purely speculating. But it wouldn't surprise me if that is the thought process, And we have to remember game management is huge now moving forwards with, 6 games remaining? Mm-hmm. You have to pick and choose your battles very, very carefully.
Yeah, I think that that point about it's tough too, because sometimes you want to rest guys. In a normal season, you might want to have a guy off and then come on for just a short shift at the end. But even at this point with this compression, you would imagine that just giving a guy a whole game off could do more than even if you needed to bring him in for a short shift. Like if somebody's really exhausted, you don't want to bring them back in, give them 20 minutes on the pitch and then sort of have to start the whole regeneration process again. He could have been thinking Ethan Finlay coming back from injury, Nashville's going to be an easier matchup on the road than Dallas. It's an Eastern Conference. It's not a 6-point game. It's a 3-point game. So if you can get a draw, which again, at the last minute, they seem content with okay, this is a draw on the road. This is, obviously you want to get a win, but if you don't want to risk anything at the end and just you want to allow that to a point to slip away because points are going to be valuable going forward. So, so to transition into the sort of the formation discussion that goes along with this, which again, I'm going to say I'm a broken record on this. The formation discussion is interesting but deceptive, sort of like a housewife of Orange County or something, because again, it's a concrete thing that, we as observers can talk about because it sort of puts numbers and sort of you can picture it in your head, but it's not always entirely clear exactly what the impact of it is. Different teams play different formations in different ways. All that said, Kevin Molino coming in and moving it from a 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1 against FC Cincinnati, it just really seemed to amp up the attack a whole level. It really went from you guys are getting decent looks, but it's not quite finishing to just chance after chance after chance. And I think it really showed that 4-2-3-1 is great. I also want to give a shout out to Reynoso, who's still goalless, but his turn off of Molino's header forward, which led to Molino's goal, was incredible. First of all, props to Molino for getting that up and then taking the run. But Reynoso's ability to sort of turn away from the defense and it just sort of opened that whole left wing that Molino went down and he got him the ball was terrific. So I just thought that again, that's one of those instances where suddenly I was like, oh, well, this just amped up the attack to this new level with Molino in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to seeing Molino and Reynoso develop even further because they look like they are starting to understand each other now, having had a little more time to train together. I would agree with you in the sense that Reynoso just looks on another level, doesn't he? Yeah. And I don't even think he's at 100% yet, Steve, as well. Yeah. I think he's slowly getting there, but watching him, it's like stroking silk, isn't it? He just seems to move effortlessly and his passing is wonderful. His little flicks and tricks, his trickery has been wonderful to see. He's a magnificent player. There's a reason he was playing for Boca Juniors, Steve. He's a very good footballer. For me, he's on another level and will really take this club to whatever the next level is deemed acceptable. I think he's a top class player, and he makes players around him better, and he certainly makes Molino better. Yeah. I thought Minnesota, just rewinding a little bit, Steve, I thought Minnesota really missed Molino for the home game against Real Salt Lake. Obviously, he was injured, but then after he was deemed fit enough to be available for the game against Cincinnati in terms of being able to go and play for 30 minutes or so, when he came on, he really made a difference. And I think that one of the things I know is noticed about Molino is, especially when you've got him on that left-hand side, he's tremendous when he cuts in on the right. That's what he tends to do. That's what he's more comfortable doing. But when he's off the ball, you do notice from time to time, he stretches the back line quite well because he will peel away from the nearest centre-back and the nearest right-back in this particular situation. He'll peel away. And then as soon as Minnesota do get the ball, that's when he moves inside. And he's tremendous. Molino is great. A fully fit Kevin Molino is still, for me, one of the best attacking midfielders in this league. So, he's a threat. He scores goals. He creates opportunities. And I'm really excited to see what both he and Reynoso can do moving forward because I think they are going to be very good. And especially now that Minnesota have a recognisable goal scorer ahead as well in Kai Kamara. It'll take time. And I think this week will be a good test for them because they've got, leading into the game on Sunday, they've got a good 3 days to train, a good solid 3 days at the very least, because I'm assuming there's an off day in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that'll help. That'll really help all of them. again, look, we don't know what the lineup's going to be for Dallas, but knowing that Kamara didn't start, knowing that Lurd didn't start, you would assume that they would be heavily involved in the game in Dallas. As you mentioned quite rightly, it's a Western Conference opponent. But moving forward, Steve, it's just good to have all these options for Minnesota United. It really is. And, I'm very much looking forward to seeing Reynoso. He just needs a goal, doesn't he? He just needs a goal. He does just about everything else. As soon as he scores his first goal for Minnesota, I seriously think the floodgates will start to open. I don't expect him to score a bucket load of goals. I don't think he's going to be one of those, at least right now, that goes and gets, in what have we got, 6, 7 games left. I don't expect him to go and get, 4 goals and 4 assists. But I do expect him to perhaps go and get 2 or 3 goals and maybe 2 or 3 further assists, because he's got the players that are ahead of him and either side of him that make the runs that he wants to find, And like I said, it's just going to take time for the chemistry to develop. But, he's one of those players, Reynoso, is that whenever he gets the ball, you just expect something to happen. I'm on the edge of the seat straight away because you just expect something to happen. So we're very fortunate to have him. He is Minnesota's best player by a country mile.
Yeah. I think also another thing that's been really impressive about him, and this sort of feeds into my next point, is I think his defensive work rate has been tremendous for an attacking midfielder in that position. And a couple of the guys on the team have mentioned that fact that, a lot of designated players don't come in expecting to, have to play a whole bunch of defense, but he's really been willing to do that work. And sort of the thing I was thinking as we were watching that 4-2-3-1 out there, once it moved from the 4-3-3, is that, and this is a theory, I don't know if we're going to see the full flowering of this because of the compressed schedule and issues with injuries and things like that, and call-ups, which we'll get to in a moment. But I think, on the surface, 4-3-3 seems more defensive than 4-2-3-1. You've got more guys in the midfield. You're sort of trying to match up with another. I mean, it's a matchup thing in a lot of ways, but you're talking about, 3 midfielders playing more centrally versus those 3 attacking mids with a forward up top. But I think that, if you're talking about Reynoso, if you're talking about Molino, Reynoso, and Lud out there as those 3, I think Lud and Reynoso's defensive work rate and their willingness to press high and everything like that it's high enough that I think it's just as defensively solid, really, as trying to play a 4-3-3 at this point. Especially if you're adding in, Ozzy Alonso when you can. If you have Alonso and Gregush back there, I think you're the 4-2-3-1 can be just as solid defensively for Minnesota United as the 4-3-3 could be. But maybe we should get into the question of Gregush, because that's the next question I have, since he's going to miss basically the rest of the regular season at this point. I don't know if you have anything to say about my 4-2-3-1 defensive theory.
No, in terms of the 4-3-3, Steve, it just depends on what you're asking of the 2 8s, because the 6 will sit, obviously, but it depends on what you're asking of the 2 players around him. Sometimes you have, when it is a 4-3-3, you've got 2 sitting and 1 ahead, but sometimes you can have the 2 ahead of the 6. So it just depends on the situation and the approach, really. But 4-2-3-1, yeah, I mean, for me, it seems like more of an attacking lineup, and also as well, in this system as well, you are asked, in most systems now, you are asked to defend from the front. Because if you, I don't think there's, especially in this league now, Steve, I don't think there's any room for luxury players. And what I mean when I say a luxury player, I mean someone who has turned up not expecting to work and as you mentioned, do the defensive work on the defensive side of the ball as well. I don't think this system lends very kindly to those types of players. So it's no surprise to me Reynoso has shone in this system. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Jan Gregush a little bit, because obviously him, he got a call up to the Slovakian national team. It's pretty huge. He's the team's assist leader, I believe, still. Losing him for 6 games, I think. And there's maybe 7 games. You're losing him for 5 or 6 games, and there's basically 7 games left at this point. I think you've missed the last game, so that's 8 games from the last game. But, I mean, I don't know much about, international competition or how this all works, but it seems to me, it's insane to me that they're calling players up into international games right now. It just seems totally crazy to me.
I understand Gregush going for the first game because it is a qualifier. It is a very important game for his country to be in the European Championships next year. So I understand that one. The next 2 are the not confusing, because again, I understand it. You want to play for your country, but it's the ones that I could see people suggesting you're okay, you can go back now. But from a Slovakian point of view, they're probably saying, well, you're here. It's 3 games in 7 days. You're playing for us. and they are games against Scotland and Israel, and they are Nations League games. Now, the Nations League was formed last year essentially to make international friendlies more competitive and essentially give a reward out to the most competitive team on the international stage for winning as many games and whatnot. And there's various other complications about it. But I know there was efforts to try and keep Jan Gregus here. I'm not entirely sure. I know Jan Gregus wanted to go and play in this qualifying game against the Republic of Ireland, as he should do, because, as I said, it's a big game. Slovakia are in and out of major tournaments. 1 year they're there, 1 year they're not, so it's few and far between. He, as a 29-year-old, will think to himself, this may be the last chance I get to play in a major tournament, a major international tournament. So I'm going to go and I'm going to make myself a part of the roster. But as I said, the Nations League one is where it can get a little bit to the point where I see the club's argument here. But it's just one of those things, Steve, because of international travel, so many people are having issues getting out of the country, getting back into the country. I myself am a little frustrated because what time is it right now? 2:00 on a Wednesday. I right now should be calling Germany against Turkey for the world feed. So I should be back in London doing games now. But because of COVID and what it's done, it's meant I can't do that. And it's caused an issue. It's caused a problem for a lot of people. So it's one of those situations where, if there is a way around it, then great. But it just doesn't seem like there is a feasible way around it at the moment. Adrian Heath only last week was saying that it's not really a feasible option for the club for Jan Gregus to be missing as many games as he is. But unfortunately, from a Minnesotan point of view, it seems as though the Slovakian Footballing Federation have had their way, and Jan Gregus will be gone now for a week to 10 days, and then he'll have to come back and quarantine for 2 weeks, I'm assuming, So he's going to miss a lot of football. And on October for Minnesota is beyond crazy. 7 games in the month of October. It's crazy. Yeah. So it's a real shame. But the one thing that I will say, Steve, from a positive point of view, is that I thought against Nashville last night, I thought Dotson and Hayes performed very, very well indeed. And I don't foresee a massive issue. If they remain at that standard for the rest of the season, I don't see a massive issue moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to get Ozzie Alonso back at some point.
Yes.
Maybe there's a time where he can come in as well. But it's true. I don't feel bad with Ja'Cory and Hassani out there, mostly because Ja'Cory gets superpowers from tucking his shirt in. It's a great look. It's fantastic. So let's talk about Nashville a little bit since you alluded to that. Again, I'm going to have a really hard time with Cincinnati and Nashville coming into the league at the same, sort of around the same time, and sort of both being that not Inter Miami, not not the other glamour franchise. So I'm sure that's how people feel about Minnesota, I guess. But I felt that the overarching statement that Adrian Heath opened with for the post-game press conference, just asked about it in general, was that this was a better performance than a result, which I would definitely agree to. Like he said, as we've all said, football is it's a funny game. The team looked better against Nashville and against Cincinnati, but got a point instead of 3 points. So that seemed evident to me. Also, my main takeaway about Nashville is that their defense is the real deal. Like their defense looks good, and it's heartening to see an expansion team built sort of in that solid way. This is kind of what we expected, I think, talking about, Inter hasn't really taken off. They've struggled to a certain extent. They have not lived up to the billing of being another LAFC or something like that right out of the gate. But we felt Nashville was going to be solid, if not, sort of spectacular. But that's kind of what we're seeing. The back line is miles ahead of where Minnesota's was at any point in the first 2 years. They really need a forward. I believe they're going to get one shortly. Derek Jones as a forward is probably still kicking himself for not finishing off that early chance, but that's not really his job. He's a midfielder. So they'll need, I'm blanking on the guy's name. Who's the guy they're getting from Portugal?
Yonder Cadiz.
Yes, thank you, Cadiz. They could really use that. But they played well defensively. I got to give them props for that.
Yeah, I agree. I said earlier on yesterday that I thought the Nashville roster is actually quite pleasing on the eye. For what is expected of an expansion season, yeah. It's actually quite good. It's much better than Minnesota's was, as you said, Steve. I couldn't agree more. The backline's very good. I'm a big fan of Lovett. So I think there's a reason he's had 11, 12 caps for the national team, for the US national team. Alistair Johnston, the young Canadian, looked really good as well. And I know that was somebody that the Minnesotan coaching staff had their eye on going into the draft as well. But obviously because of Minnesota finishing so well in the 2019 season, they had to wait for their pick, and Nashville picked him before Minnesota could get to him. And the two centre halves, they've played for clubs where there is expectation. Dave Romney had several years at LA Galaxy. Walker Zimmerman had 2 years with LAFC, who simply just because of the marketplace, there was expectation on them straight away. So they've played under pressure. They've developed a good relationship as well over the short time that they've played together. I thought they looked good. And Joe Willis is a serviceable Major League Soccer goalkeeper. He did well. He was fantastic in the game against New England.
Yeah, I mean, he's in form also right now. Like maybe not an elite goalkeeper, but he's playing super well right at this moment also. So.
He is 7 shutouts now. He's never had that many in a single season. So I think he's good. And I remember chatting to somebody, I think who was it? It was an agent or somebody a couple of weeks before the season started. Seems like an eternity ago. And he was saying, this is an individual that deals with international players coming into the league, and he was saying the one piece of advice that he'd given a lot of Major League Soccer managers, particularly those on expansion teams, over the course of the last 18 months, was that you simply cannot have enough MLS experience in your team when you are an expansion team. And I think Nashville SC have really taken that advice to heart. Mm-hmm. Not only have they gone and got Zimmerman and Romney, two very good centre halves who have a boatload of MLS experience, they've also gone and done that ahead of them and gotten one of the best sixes that MLS has ever had in Dax McCarty for the expansion season as well. Can you imagine if Minnesota would have had McCarty or Alonso in the expansion year, it would have been a completely different team. Yeah. So
they almost did in Sam Cronin, except he couldn't finish he could have been that in a lot of ways, except if not for his health issues that sort of curtailed his career, because he looked like that when he came in, like that guy who was going to be the sixth and sort of hold everything down and like lift the whole back line and keep everything together. But obviously it didn't pan out that way. But certainly having a Dax McCarty would be great.
I think having a solid foundation in your expansion year is it cannot be underrated. So I think they look good defensively. As you said, the only thing is they need to score more goals, and I think it's 11 goals all year. It's not enough. Dominique Bargy offers you something. Abu Danladi, as we know, offers you a little extra off the bench. But the new lad that they're bringing in, Cadiz, he reminds me of a goal-scoring Angelo Rodriguez. He's a big body. He's a target man who will allow them to play direct when they want to. And I could very easily see them having Leal and Muyl either side of him, and maybe going a 4-3-3. That I think that would suit them moving forwards. But I from what I've seen, I like the lad Cadiz. I think I'm not sure he's going to score a boatload of goals, but there's a reason why he plays for Benfica. He's scored some goals in previous loan spells, but I think more than anything, he allows them to go direct. And they look a decent expansion outfit for sure. And as you quite rightly say, Steve, they look a little better than Inter Miami, which is a sentence I don't think any of us thought we would utter in this season. There was so much expectation for Inter Miami coming in. And now with the signings of Matuidi and Gonzalo Higuain, there's expectation there. So I was impressed by Nashville. I thought the opening 20 minutes of the game was about as fast and fluid of an opening of a game that we've seen all season. I must admit, I really enjoyed calling those opening 20, 25 minutes. And there were chances all over the place. But look, I think anytime you can go on a road and get a point in this league, especially when you are doing what you're doing and traveling down on the same day, I think it's a good thing, and if you can claim 3 points anywhere right now with the way that things are, I think it's an added bonus. I really do. And it's the same for everybody, Steve, but that doesn't mean it's not difficult.
Yeah. I think that talking about Inter Miami and how Nashville has looked better overall, Cal, it's interesting because I think Inter Miami was playing a high variable. wider gap in what was potentially could happen versus what would happen, which is a risky thing. I think their tolerance for risk was higher. Nashville's was a little more conservative, like probably a higher floor but a lower ceiling. But then this season happening the way it's happened is like, if the season had been a normal season, I could have seen Inter Miami working a lot better, more consistency, more time to put their pieces together, sort of growing that. They have not had that. Nashville, like you said, came in with a lot of MLS experience on the roster and just sort of an expectation of like, well, we're not going to score a ton, but we're going to not give up a ton. And that's what they've done. So speaking of not giving up a ton, the last thing I wanted to mention about that game against Nashville, I don't really want to say that. I don't think that Dane Sinclair is being overlooked exactly in terms of the conversation about, in MLS right now. I mean, I see stories about, the three things to take away from that game and saying that his performance was particularly good. But I think I've been thinking that like heading into the future, given that the 2020 season is like a complete as absolute carnage, to borrow a phrase from you. It might be that the biggest thing Minnesota United gets out of the 2020 season is the emergence of a possible first choice goalkeeper here at the age of, 23. Like, I mean, if he plays the rest of the season at the level that he's at, which isn't totally guaranteed, I think that we've seen from players from Mason Toy to Abu Danladi, like young players can have up and down phases, and that learning to manage that is a huge part of sort of maturing as a player. So I can fully expect him to go through a rocky patch at some point. But if what we're seeing right now is more or less like his floor for performance and he's going to improve from that point, like, is there any reason to think you would want to bring in another keeper to put ahead of him? I mean, like in the future, or are you just saying like, if this is his floor, this is our guy?
I think it's going to be extremely difficult for the coaching staff of Minnesota United to look elsewhere moving forwards. You have to ask yourself, what is the situation with Tyler Miller moving forward? And you're quite right, Steve, in saying that, it's been a good spell for Dane Sinclair, but it's been a short spell as well. The real question is, can he do this over a 34-game season? And the answer is we don't know at the moment. So are the coaching staff willing to take that risk and go with him next season? Or are they going to go with the more solid and veteran presence of Tyler Miller? We don't know. But the good thing is that they've got options. We know Ranjit Singh is a decent backup goalkeeper as well. I think, I'll be honest, Steve, it's the one area where I don't really worry for Minnesota United, the goalkeeping area. And I'd say Stuart Kerr, the goalkeeping coach, has got to be given some serious credit for this as well, because Dane Sinclair, I remember watching him train last year and seeing him from then to how he is now. Stuart Kerr deserves so much praise because he's clearly worked with him on several different things. His distribution still needs a little bit of work, I think, but his positioning is very good. He gets across very quickly. Shot stopping has been wonderful. The one save he made from Randall Leal's effort from the edge in the first half was magnificent.
Yeah, absolutely.
He gets down very, very quickly now, where I'm not convinced that was the case prior to him really working consistently with Stuart Kerr. So, as I said, Steve, it's the one area that I don't really worry about. But there's one thing for sure. If Dane Sinclair keeps up this form, it is going to be a head-scratching moment for Adrian Heath moving forward, because right now, essentially, he's got two, given the way that Dane Sinclair has performed, essentially now he's got two first-choice goalkeepers.
Yeah, I mean, again, and we don't know anything about what 2021 is going to look like how soon it's going to happen, for MLS and everything like that. I mean, my feeling is that if Dane essentially maintains this form for the rest of the season, you got to say you're the incumbent goalkeeper, and put him in there. And then if he struggles, then you've got Tyler Miller. You put Tyler, it's like, again, Adrian Heath, I'm sure it's a tough choice to make, but he loves to have players push each other for positions, and that's essentially what's happening here. All right, let's shift to talking about FC Dallas. Well. If it isn't these guys, FC Dallas. I was looking back at the form guide on MLSsoccer.com, which is one of my favorite pages now. It helps because I can't remember what any other team has done or when any other team has played or anything like that anymore. So over the last 8 games for Minnesota United and FC Dallas, they have the exact same record. They're both 3-2-3, and then over the last 3, it's a loss and 2 draws for Dallas, and a draw, a win, and a draw from Minnesota. So it's sort of feels like to me, I don't know what to make of LAFC because they should be a lot better than they are, but they're not that great. So I'm sort of leaving them out of this conversation for right now. But it seems sort of highly possible that, as with last year, MNUFC is basically in that class of FC Dallas, Colorado, Real Salt Lake, somewhere in that group. I would put them toward the top of that group, but they also pay me to say that. So, but I mean, we've talked before about what Minnesota United's ceiling is, that we think they could be a top 3 team, maybe not a top team, but a top 3 team in the Western Conference, depending on health. Taking a slightly more cynical view, I just feel like that's going to be the dogfight in there. It's going to be Minnesota United, Dallas, Colorado, Real Salt Lake. If somebody's hot at the end, they could be at the top. If it stays the way it is, Minnesota United is likely to be at the top of that. But, I feel like Minnesota United and Dallas right now, not much separating them in terms of how their seasons have gone and what the results are.
The only thing separating them is the fact that FC Dallas will be playing in Frisco, Texas again.
Sure, yeah.
Minnesota are 0-4 when they go down to Toyota Stadium. It's a place they've always struggled. It's a place where they've never really been able to get into a rhythm. Fafa Picault, as we saw earlier on this year, has caused problems for Romain Métanire. That'll be interesting to see how that particular duel goes. I wonder, because I can't imagine Adrian Heath saying to Métanire, be a little more reserved today, because Métanire is essentially a part of the attack when they move forward. He's so fluid going forward. But what do you do? Because we saw in the last game, Métanire was run ragged by Fafa Picault. Let's call a spade here, And I do wonder what's going to happen there. And I think Dallas have. I saw the highlights for their last game. I'm looking forward to watching them this evening against Houston Dynamo. But the 3 players that they have behind Frank O'Hara, who we're still not sure, is he Argentine? Is he Irish? We're not entirely sure, are we?
Frank O'Hara.
Frank O'Hara.
He's the poet. Frank O'Hara is one of my favorite poets.
Frank O'Hara has benefited from the service of the new number 10 that they've brought in from Colombia, Ricalte, and Pico and Barrios behind him. They are menacing. They can cause real problems. So they're a good team. They're a really good team. Don't get anywhere near the credit they deserve. I think Luchi Gonzalez has done a really good job with them. Did you see last week as well, Steve? They signed their 30th homegrown player from the academy. I mean, it just, it's insane. And
it's a great territory. I mean, Texas is a great territory for soccer.
It is. And it's fabulous for US soccer as well to have the ability to do that and to churn out these young players. And, let's not forget, it was the FC Dallas Academy that churned out Weston McKennie, who's now a Juventus player. So, it's just the way they do things. And I feel as though they deserve all the plaudits there. I just don't think they get anywhere near the credit they deserve. They're a much better team than people give them credit for. It's a tough place to go. I don't know what the temperature is going to be because it's obviously October, but I can't imagine it's going to be the roaring heat of 110 or anything like that anymore. I'm assuming it'll be 80 degrees, maybe. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a tough one. And I wonder if Minnesota will have to be a little more reserved and be a little more defensive-minded. I don't know. But I'll tell you now, Steve, if you offered me a point, I would take it away at FC Dallas right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that as much as we would all like to see 3 points from every game whenever possible, I think realism says we should be satisfied with a point, especially against a tough opponent on the road in a place that's been difficult. I hope it's not that hot, but I don't know. Dallas, you could get a heat wave. So the last thing I wanted to say about this game, I would have to go back in time and figure out exactly where this trend stopped for Minnesota last year. But there was a span of time where Minnesota was like, the record was 5-4-3 and then 6-5-4 and then 7-5-6 and then 8-7-6. Like it was always counting down like through the record. Recently, Minnesota was 5-4-3 again and are now 6-5-4. I mean, they were 6-5-4 and then the draw. So now they're 6-5-5. So based on this trend, I'm going to predict a loss against Dallas, but then a win against Chicago to keep up the. Then it'll be 7-6-5. So that's my call right now for the.
Yeah, I would say you have every right to make that prediction. I don't think you're too far off the mark. But I do think I think there's every reason to believe Minnesota can go and get something in Dallas for sure. But then as you quite rightly said then, Steve, and we have said it on the Fox Sports North broadcast now for a long time, the home games are absolutely vital, and the home games against Chicago and Houston, the home wins are becoming compulsory now. They really are. You have to. So we know Minnesota have perhaps got a little bit of ground to make up because they didn't have as many home games as a lot of other people did. It took them a long time to be given that right, for whatever reason. The 0-0 draw at home to RSL will sting a little bit, I think. So I think now they need to go out, and I think the pressure's on, and I think that's okay, especially at this level of football. It's fine. So I think they will take what they can away at FC Dallas, knowing that the next two games against Chicago and Houston are, I think when we get to it, they will be the biggest games of the season so far.
Yeah, sounds about right. Well, thanks for joining us for the 116th Sound of the Loons podcast. Minnesota United's next game is on Sunday, October 11th at 7:30 p.m. as the Loons head to Texas to face FC Dallas. You can watch that on Fox Sports North and listen on Score North. Be sure to leave us a nice review on iTunes or at the very least a 5-star rating, and follow the team on Twitter at MNUFC. You can follow Cal at CalWilliamsCom and me at Steve Ventris, where I have a viral tweet which is beginning to dog me. It's just beginning to make it hard to follow anything else on Twitter. So it means nothing. I'm not trying to like, I don't care. I will delete the tweet right now. I don't really care, but it's got like 50,000 likes and I just keep seeing likes keep popping up. So it's just makes it a pain in the butt.
Your mentions are just blowing up, I'm sure. Yeah. Wow.
That's just silly. So anyways, but you can still follow me. I don't know. A lot of people are following me now based on that. I'm like, it's not always this good. Don't worry. Apologies as always to Richard Wagner. And remember, there's only one person in this whole world like you, and people can like you exactly as you are.